I'm Dusty, and welcome back to my lab. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the IsOught problem, and I'm going to talk about it in the framework of what I call, or what I know of as the mouse parable. So in the mouse parable, there is an industrious mouse and there's a lazy mouse. And the industrious mouse, for whatever reason, knows that even though it's summer right now, in this toy example, that in a few months, it's going to be winter. So the industrious mouse, every time he finds a seed or a nut or a berry or whatever, he eats one, and then when he's pretty satiated for the day, he puts one away for winter. And he builds a little mouse hole for the winter, and he's all ready. And fall comes, the leaves start coming down, and he's all ready. But the lazy mouse, he's just been screwing around all summer. He's just been filling his face and not paying any attention to the fact that it's going to be winter. And so the industrious mouse, he takes it upon himself. He's like, well, maybe give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he just doesn't know that it's going to be winter, right? So he tells the lazy mouse, hey man, you might want to start, preparing for winter here, because it's coming. I know it's really nice weather right now, but I have it on good authority that it's going to be winter. The lazy mouse says, you don't know that. Where do you get your information from, right? So, sure enough, winter comes, and next thing you know, the lazy mouse is knocking at the industrious mouse's door, and the industrious mouse says, come on in, right? So, there's a couple morals there, and depending on the version of the story, the second moral might be different, right? So, the first moral of the story is pretty simple, prepare for winter. Delay gratification, and do the hard work now that you're going to have to do eventually, or else it's all going to pile up and you're going to be in trouble, right? The other moral, though, is at the end, when the industrious mouse lets the lazy mouse in, the moral of forgiveness. Now, depending on who's telling the story, or what version of the story you hear, the other version might be that the industrious mouse closes the door in his face, and this is the interesting part about it, right? And this is what I'm going to try to drive home. So what the is-ought problem is this. If the world is a way, how can you ever know what to do? And, this is generally in a moral sense. If you wanted to live a good life, if you wanted to be a moral person and live a good life, good, fulfilling, fun, maybe that's part of it, life, what do you do, right? How can you objectively come to any decision? How can you ever do anything, I mean, it comes back to this is an ethical question, and consequentialism, and just understanding, based on what I know and what I think, what should I do with this knowledge, and how should I live my life? So, clearly the is part, is trickier than I'm making it sound. Everyone has their own version of reality and their own perception, and that's an important bit, right? And we'll get more into that. But based on, this toy example, even in the most basic scenario, where we have just two anthropomorphized mice who need to, prepare for the winter, what ought they do? Well, I mean, common sense tells you that they should probably plan for the winter, right? They should probably start stockpiling and whatever, and that's the moral of the story. But here's the thing: it's like, well, what if the lazy mouse is adamant and that he doesn't care? What if he's like, and this is kind of messed up, but let's just imagine that he has agency and decides that he is fine with perishing in the winter. This is his last summer. He doesn't care. He's just going to live it up, and he's just going to do that. Well, I mean, then he ought to do what he did. That's in line with his morals and in line with his goal. Now, we can question whether that's a good goal or whether or not, that's right or and right is questionable, and I'm going to explain that, right? So, here's the thing, fundamentally, why do we say that they ought to prepare for winter? Well, we have this assumption, base assumption as living beings that we want to live, right? The body needs food, water, and shelter. If the mouse doesn't get that for the winter, when it's sparse, then he's going to die, right? So that's where we get that drive, this is common sense. You have to prepare for the winter. But only, he ought to only do that if that's his goal, right? So this is fundamentally the problem. It's like, what ought you do? Well, I mean, whatever you want, really, but you have to also acknowledge that the world is a way, and there are certain things that, and that isness of the world is not, debatable. You need to eat or you're going to die. You need to drink or you're going to die. You need shelter, you're going to die, right? Just as a human being. And, if you were some other creature, you'd have a different set of rules. Now, so that's kind of that's the beginning of this, right? So what ought they do? Kind of whatever they want, right? Whatever is in line with their goals. And they fundamentally set those goals. Now, I said, where did that industrious mouse get that goal? Where did the lazy mouse get that goal? Well, the truth is that sure there's a a subjective personal agency and decision making and choice involved with it. But it's like this, and I've thought about this for a long time. When you're a little kid and your mom tells you don't go in the cookie jar, why don't you do it? Right? Well, for a while it's because she's your mom and because what she says goes, right? But eventually you start questioning and you're like, oh, well, why does she want me to not eat cookies? Why does she now want me to go in the cookie jar? Well, because I'll spoil my dinner. Well, because then you won't eat dinner, and there's work, and it's a routine, and it needs to be, you see what I'm saying? So, like, there is a reason for the not going in the cookie jar, okay? And it actually has logical deduction and, like, reasoning behind it, but the subject setting that goal is the mother, okay? And if the son does the mental calculation that this is within my morals to just follow what my mother says, then that's a moral judgment, right? And that's actually a moral act to not go in the cookie jar. But the thing is that it's basically allowing some other agent to make that moral decision for you, to set that goal for you. And I think that it's actually really important, for us to set our own goals and set our own moral standards, because if we don't, then we're trapped really by what I'm going to say next. So, where did the industrious mouse get his work ethic and his belief system? Well, the truth is there aren't just two mice that just poof into existence in a toy example. They have families and kids and relatives and culture and I'm imagining, the mice are humans, right? We have lots of stuff going on here. We have, lots of influences. We have lots of people telling us what's right and wrong, or what to do, or what we ought to do, or what we ought to want, or what we ought to need, right? And so it's this constant game of, like, deciding, like, is this what this person is saying, does that align with my morals? Where is their reasoning for thinking that that's moral? And then fundamentally, we, like, what differs morals from ethics, and why someone can work within their own morals and their own integrity but still act unethically, is because ethics are kind of an agreed upon moral structure for society, right? So this is the other aspect of it. I said he should be able to do whatever he wants. Well, can the mouse go and kill the other mouse? Well, we want to say that's not right. Well, then why isn't it right? Because he's preventing this mouse from doing whatever he wants, right? So as long as we're doing our own thing and we're not interfering with one another doing our own thing, the most fundamental good is choice, right? I mean, you can make bad choices, but the choice itself is the fundamental good in my mind, right? And to infringe on this mouse's right is wrong, and to infringe on this mouse's right is wrong, no matter what their belief system is, okay? And the thing is though, like, it gets, like, in modern society and in an actual world and in an actual scenario, it isn't as simple as this mouse just, I don't care if I perish during the winter, okay? Or, like, I don't care if I'm going to make this negligent, like, really risky move. Because the thing is like, in an actual scenario, it has repercussions, right? So, a bad example, but a hyperbolic example, but one that might spur some thought, is, like, imagine if we did have universal basic health care, right? And, like, where does Evel Knievel fall in there, right? Like, someone who consistently puts their body at risk, and, like, and granted, like, it's all within the grand scheme of things. So, like, he's entertaining, and, like, and people want to give him and enable him to do these crazy stunts because it's entertaining, and, like, that's his value that he's adding to society. But, like, what if someone is just crazy and, like, and they're not doing it for entertainment, and they're not really contributing anything to society? They're just stressing people out and causing problems. Like, that's, in some sense, like, even their own body is the commons, in the sense that, like, the babbling brook and the grass and the seeds and the berries are all the commons, right? And the thing is like, what if the mice start stealing one another's stuff? Like, because eventually they're going to have private property. They're going to have to. It happens once you start what if he builds the shelter, and then the other mouse just walks in and squats in it, and you're like, oh, mine now, thanks. That's not fair. That's not right. And he's infringing on this mouse's right to do what he wants, which is to build a shelter and live in it, right? So, this is the thing. We ought to be able to do whatever we want, but we have what the commons are, and what we're all working within and dealing with is universal, and we all have to interact with it. And the more and more complicated and specialized and technologically advanced we as human beings get, the harder and harder and harder this is going to get, okay? Just figuring out who's stepping on who's doing what, you know, who's allowed to do this, who's not allowed to do that. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. But I think if we boil it down to this toy example and just see, like, you know, this is how it is, what they ought to do is what they want, as long as it doesn't interfere with the other, then, you know, that's kind of that's the basics. Like, that's the basics. And, like, this is why I don't really like the do unto others as you would like them to do unto you, because how do you know if what you want is what someone else wants? You don't. But what you can do is whatever you want, and if someone makes it clear that you're infringing on what they want to do, you know, then that's a problem, right? And we have to take into consideration not just the mice or the humans, and, you know, also all the animals and the environment, and it's all kind of the commons. Even our experiences are the commons, right? And we should be striving to make that common experience better for one another, not worse. And we should be enabling one another to do what we want, as long as it's not hurting anyone else. One other thing I want to talk about, and like something that's significant, is imagine if both of the mice were industrious, right? Okay? There's this new concept that I've learned about. It's called moral luck. And it's the idea that two people can do the same thing, good or bad, and have an unfair or an unpredicted result, right? So they're both industrious and they're both going out and they're both, you know, they both want to survive the winter, and then eventually maybe they want to work together, right? But to no fault of his own, you know, the one mouse, as he's walking down the street, you know, down through the trail in the woods, he trips over a rock and breaks his leg really badly, and they have to amputate his leg, right? So, like, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't, you know, that he was negligent or anything. He was trying to do what he and even maybe perhaps the other mouse wanted to do. But what, is he just out on his own now? Is he just screwed because he can't produce as much as the other one? A similar thing, right? So imagine the other industrial mouse gives him a hard time now, right? And then you know, so this guy struggles for the rest of his life. He's struggling. The other mouse finds a mate and has kids. One of his kids has a birth defect, right? So it's a similar thing. You know, life isn't fair. Well, it isn't, you know, like, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try to make it fair, right? As far as, like, what we can control. And whereas those things are out of our control, we can control how we treat one another, and we can't control what laws and morals we set for ourselves and one another. So anyway, that's pretty much my thought process with this. Hopefully it was helpful. If you want me to expand more on this in a specific way, I think it's a really helpful analogy and little parable to think about. But anyway, thanks guys. Have a good one. Please like and subscribe. Bye.